Hello, I'm your father. I'm very proud of you. Sorry, I just figured some of you needed to hear that. We're in a really weird time of video games right now. It's been almost 2 years and Sony's PlayStation 5 is still not easily accessible. You have to follow some weird guy named Wario on Twitter and hope that he can find you one. You'd actually find more luck finding an Xbox Series S or X, but honestly, who wants to do that? The games look amazing, but do they honestly look that much better than last generation? How many AAA games are even coming out this year? Well, there is the Resident Evil 4 remake that's coming out. I don't quite get why that's being remade. I mean, that's literally like on every platform possible. It is a hugely beloved game, so I kinda get it. At least Capcom does release their legacy content, unlike somebody else we know, Nintendo. Can you believe that game came out in 2005? I also heard there's a Dead Space remake coming out. I fucking love Dead Space. I would even go as far to say it's one of my favorite games of all time. But I do have the Xbox 360 version, and that is backwards compatible on an Xbox One X. See, I'm not that much of a hater. I also have it on Steam. So why are they remaking it? It's honestly one of the best looking games of that generation. I think it holds up really well. I guess it is coming up 12 years old. Hey, I wonder what Jeff Keighley's I'm a Piece of Shit, Watch Me festival is announcing.
It's really, when you play it, when you see it in motion, it's really night and day from what
I don't know what I expected. The Last of Us was put out 9 years ago and was remastered 8 years ago. And there was a sequel 2 years ago. There's an HBO adaptation coming out. Hey, do you remember the fucking Last of Us? I'm in a weird predicament right now where 2 of my favorite games of all time are being remade. And shouldn't that make me like incredibly stoked? The problem is, I don't really give a shit. So that's kind of why I'm making this video, is to kind of figure out why these are being remade, besides the obvious.
Money!
Remakes are incredibly interesting to me. There's something in my bones that fascinates me to no end about them. You might be looking at the length of this video and wonder, why in the world are you going to watch this guy talking about video game remakes? Because when I was in college, I did exactly the same thing, only I talked about movie remakes instead. In 2017, my senior thesis, Rebooting the Remake, was discussed in front of an entire class, discussing the purpose of remakes and how they've changed over the years. I'm not at liberty to say what my grade was, but I did months of research and I'm gonna be using it, damn it. Let's talk about the history of remakes. In a separate medium, movie remakes are almost as old as movies are. The first ever movie remake was in 1904 of a French film called Personal. Funny enough, the person who remade it was none other than Thomas Edison. He made a more humorous take on the short film. And why did he remake it? Well, we all know that Thomas Edison loved to take ideas and make them his own. Remakes have been prominent in movie theaters for years. There's even some remakes that are often regarded as the better version of the movie. You know, I consider myself a film snob. So when I see a movie's getting remade, my first instinct is usually, hey, there's no point for that movie to get made. The original is perfect as it is. Some movies can prove me wrong, but I'd say more often than not, I'm right. Of course, this isn't always the objective opinion, and movie remakes have changed a lot. What I talked about in my thesis was about how studios will often dress up a remake with a new title, the soft reboot. This is where movies technically have the same continuity of its predecessor, but have an incredibly similar plot, i.e. Jurassic World or Star Wars The Force Awakens. In video games, you can take a look at the God of War game from 2018 in the same vein. It doesn't have the same plot as the original God of War, but it's a great jumping on point. Why are remakes made?
Money!
Okay, yes, I understand that. One of the big things that draws people to remakes is the brand recognition. Hey, I know Disney's The Jungle Book. I'm gonna go see Disney's The Jungle Book 2016 starring Bill Murray as Baloo and others. But Resident Evil 4, I only know offhandedly. That's why I had a discussion with my best friend Colby. I wanted to talk to him with his insight on the game and see if it should get remade or not.
Resident Evil 4 is a great game. The best part of Resident Evil 4 is the inventory system.
Okay.
The managing your attaché case is phenomenal and is worthy of a game all on its own. But all jokes aside, RE4, it's considered one of the best games of its generation and or of all time, and it's very deserved. I played it for the first time probably in 2012 or so, it was definitely after it had been out for quite a few years, and I think it might have already gotten an HD re-release at that point, but I played the original on the GameCube.
Okay.
But the game's phenomenal, and it really helped get me into more horror games, really.
Okay.
Because before that, I hadn't played nearly as many horror games. But it really, I think it's one of the best early examples of a well put together over-the-shoulder third-person shooter. I think a lot of games after it really took a lot of cues from that game.
I've heard it described as like the first like over-the-shoulder shooter. Is that correct?
I would say it's correct.
Yeah.
I would say it's bare minimum, because there's always going to be somebody in the comments that points out something was released a week before RE4 was.
Yeah.
But I would say at bare minimum, it was the first, widely successful mainstream third-person shooter. I would absolutely say that, and it really made a blueprint for a lot of other developers to follow. I do have a weird sort of relationship with RE4 that I think some other Resident Evil fans do, where that game is both the sort of height of that era of the franchise, but as a result, it is the beginning of the decline of the franchise.
Okay.
Because that is what really pivoted the game in a more action-oriented direction.
Right.
And that is often considered to be, and I would agree, is considered to be the part of what is not good about RE5 and 6.
Okay.
Was the further leaning into action that started with RE4.
My boy likes Resident Evil. It's no doubt one of the most important video games in video game history. It's touted as one of the first, if not the first, third-person over-the-shoulder shooter of its kind. It was incredibly revolutionary. Over the years, Resident Evil 4 has sold over 10.4 million copies. And to be honest, that source was kind of old, so it's probably even more than that. You can play this on every single console that's available to you right now. It's on the PlayStation, it's on the Xbox, it's on the Switch, it's on a fucking Oculus. Look, Ma, I'm in a better world. Zombos. It's pretty bad when the world of Resident Evil is better than real life right now. Not to mention all of the legacy consoles that it's on. It was on like the Wii, it was on the GameCube, on the PS2, that's the copy that I have. It's probably the most ported game that you could play. Now we fast forward to 2022. Resident Evil 2 and 3 have been fully remade. Resident Evil 2 was the first Resident Evil game that I actually played to completion, with the help of Colby. RE2 was remade from the top-down, fixed camera style to a third-person, over-the-shoulder puzzle shooter. Many will argue that this is the way to go for these games. Fixed camera games are just fucking hard to get back into after years of Call of Duty melting your brain. I thought it was pretty good. I didn't really know until later that the point of the early RE games are to play them over and over to get really good at them. The puzzle solving becomes satisfying and it's almost turned into a speedrunner's paradise. RE3 was in the same vein of the RE2 remake. I haven't played it, but I know it's in the same games engine and plays almost exactly the same. Resident Evil 4 Remake was announced during the PlayStation State of Play on June 2nd, 2022, and it was received with a tremendous, yeah, I guess. Look, I don't have anything negative to say about being remade. It makes a lot of sense.
So I think one of their big goals with these remakes is that they want to tonally unify the games. That is a trend I've noticed ever since RE7 Biohazard came out.
Right. And RE8 you can do third person now.
You can.
It is interesting that you bring that up, because that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the biggest thing I noticed when RE7 came out was how much more serious it was from other Resident Evil games, because the Resident Evil games are goofy. I mean, there's no other way around it. I mean, they are silly games when you really get down to what they are.
From the first one, there's that zombie talking, like the written note from the zombie saying like, "Oh, I want brains." And
Itchy
stuff
tasty.
Like that.
I think they're using this opportunity to, okay, we're going to make all these games in the same engine, in the RE engine, which, fun fact, is the Reach engine. A lot of people think it's the Resident Evil engine, but it's the Reach engine.
Oh, okay.
I think they're going, we want to make all these games in the same engine, where they're going to have a very similar visual aesthetic. They're going to have a similar tonal aesthetic. We're going to finally, have some consistency with the voice actors, because those have changed over every release as the series has gone on. So I think more than anything else, I think what they're going to pull from the other remakes they've done so far is they're going to pull the tone from those remakes.
Okay.
And just make it sort of fit, visually, aesthetically, every element, to make it more in line with what is now RE2, 3, will be 4, and then 7 and 8.
Right. So there you go. Capcom is trying to put cohesion between all the Resident Evil games. Even Resident Evil 8 has a new third-person mode that just got announced. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if RE7 got that kind of treatment. So how do I feel about this RE4 remake? To be honest, the first instinct would be to go tell Capcom to go fuck yourself and you're not taking my $60. But to be fair, the Resident Evil remakes have basically become the definitive editions of playing these Resident Evil games. Plus, to be honest, they're frequently on sale for dirt cheap, and then they're accessible without the dumb shit tank controls. Here are some other opinions on Resident Evil 4 being remade. I also had conversations with my friends Cooper and Nick to see what their opinion is on these games being remade. All of these interviews can also be found on any podcast platform under the name Jimmy Fitch and Friends, and on my second YouTube channel, Son of a Fitch 2. Check that out.
I will say that I am going to get the fourth one. I have tried getting into, the fourth one on the PS4. Try to do it. I think I have it on the PC. I sure do. I have a huge library. So I've tried to get into it, and I feel like a fresh coat of paint for me. A fresh coat of paint with this would go a long way. And I've played the second remastered one, and I played the remake, and I played the third one.
Yes.
And I wasn't a fan of the third one, but that was a lot of people were the same way. It's just too short. But it played the same way as the second one, so I was happy enough. So yeah, I'm excited for the fourth one. I will personally get it and play it and have fun with it. So I can finally say that, hey, I played it.
Have you played any of the Resident Evil remakes that have been coming out recently?
No, I haven't played them, but again, I've watched people play them because I'm interested in them, but not interested in spending money on them.
That's fair. That's very fair.
But most recently I just watched someone play Resident Evil 8, and that looked fine.
Yeah. So what draws people to consume remade content? No, it's not the 8-ball of cocaine that they give you for pre-ordering something. It's the title. Ghostbusters 2016 wouldn't have gotten remade if it wasn't going to be called Ghostbusters. The producers wanted to use that title because they knew it was going to give them fuckloads of cash. Well, they hoped. Is a remake always a bad idea though? With the Resident Evil remakes, we talked about how they basically become the definitive editions. You don't have to worry about bad graphics, the gameplay should be as smooth as butter, and any missteps that they had in the original can easily be polished out. And now they can all be played cohesively without decades of innovations between them. And that's when we get to the next thing on the table. In 2008, Visceral Games put out a game that scared grandmas half to death.
Oh my god! I think it'll make a person become insane.
Dead Space is one of my favorite games of all time. This game follows engineer Isaac Clarke, formerly a silent protagonist, on his way to do a distress signal on the spaceship Ishimura. There, Isaac is greeted by some lovely former humans that try to slash away at his guts and head. Isn't that lovely? Isaac goes and finds the weapons that cut off their limbs to render them useless, finds his way to repair the ship, like any good engineer would do during an apocalyptic event that is on the quest to find his weird, cryptic girlfriend. During the journey, you listen to and read logs that state that there's a cult on the ship to find a mysterious red marker. They find it, people go fucking nuts whenever they go near it, tried to kill people, then the necromorphs came and infected the dead bodies. And here we are. Doesn't that sound rad as fuck? There's a lot of reasons why I love this game. It did get 2 subsequent sequels after that, although we don't talk about the third one.
Shame they never made a third game.
Yeah, they never made a third game. I guess
So much potential that they never tapped into.
Right.
And a lot of people will say that Dead Space 2 is even the best one out of all 3. It really did scare those grandmas.
This game is an atrocity.
There's something about the first game that really does make it my favorite, though. I do always love a bottle episode. You're stuck in one place and there's no way out. It's kind of like that episode of Doctor Who where he's stuck on that spaceship, the impossible planet. Or like the first Alien movie where they're in the spaceship and there's nowhere to go. They're in space. There's just something about that tickles my brain so good. Even Doom 3 had that kind of feel where you're stuck on the base on Mars and there's no way out. I always felt like Doom 3 was kind of a predecessor to Dead Space. Dead Space is so atmospheric and there's some really fucking scary moments in there, and the atmosphere is great and the sound design is fantastic, and for a game in 2008, the graphics still look fucking amazing. Now we have to argue, does this game have to get remade? It's not as accessible as Resident Evil 4, but it is backwards compatible on an Xbox, and it is pretty playable on like a low-end PC.
They're definitely like reaching new audiences, and
Right.
and like they always say, like what they always say, that stupid thing. It says returning players and new players will now experience the new the you know,
Right.
all over again and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that they are putting a lot of effort into remaking just the first one, whereas you have seen people make, or you know, all the Crash Bandicoot games, all 3 of them. They've made all the Spyro games.
Right.
I mean, I know those are completely different.
Mass
but,
Effect,
like-
Mass Effect trilogy.
Mass Effect trilogy. I mean, they remastered that.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't remake it. I think they just, they just ported it into like.
I think
later
they did
consoles
some
and
quality of life improvements and stuff too, though.
Did they?
I believe so.
Probably,
I could
yeah.
be wrong about that, but
Yeah, you might be right. I mean, like, again, it's just one of those things where it's like, when it comes to like, that's the difference between porting and remastering, right? So it's
Right.
just, so yeah, I think that Dead Space definitely could have had at least 1 and 2 in there.
I think it's a way for EA to gauge interest in the franchise. And I
Good
think
reason.
that that's true of a lot of these remakes. Like EA recently did the Mass Effect Legendary edition or collection, whichever word they used. And again, you have a case where Mass Effect Andromeda came out and it was terrible. Fight me, it was bad.
Yep.
You know, and that comes as someone that I've played the Mass Effect trilogy, the entire trilogy, at least 5 times. I love Mass Effect, and I could not bear to play Andromeda. It was just bad.
Right.
And you know, obviously, if you asked an executive, would they give you a straight answer on this? Maybe, maybe not. In my non-expert opinion, I think that a lot of these remakes are a way, you know, because and then I'll circle back to Dead Space with this, because they're kind of similar situations that both franchises are in.
Right.
Because in Dead Space, you know, Dead Space 3 was not received very well,
Right.
both, you know, critically and by the fan base. and they released the DLC that kind of ended the franchise with a little bit of a thud. And so then they kind of shelved the series, and then you have a similar case with Mass Effect Andromeda, where you have a very popular franchise, new game comes out, it gets panned critically, and some people have come back around to it on replaying it, but it's still very negatively received, and they shelved all DLC of it. So that was a very clear example of they kind of saw the response, and they just put the series on ice for a little while. So that's why I bring up Mass Effect, in response to Dead Space, because I think that both franchises are in a very similar spot to each other.
I got a dog now, by the way. Do you think EA is seeking out any interest in Dead Space? Is it a bad idea to remake 1 and not just remaster 1, 2, and 3 and just port them over to other systems? How many developers are working on this that could be working on like a reboot or just something else completely? There is a new game that's kind of a spiritual successor that the original creators are working on called the Callisto Protocol, and that game looks fucking good. This remake was the idea to make this video because it got announced and I had basically no reaction to it, even though Dead Space 1 is my favorite of the Dead Space games. After it was announced, there was no hype whatsoever from me. I was just sitting here sadder than I was after my parents got divorced. So The Last of Us is getting a shot-for-shot remake. That's always been a good idea. Neil Druckmann, the co-creator of The Last of Us, had announced at Summer Games Fest 2022, and leaked way earlier, that The Last of Us Part 1 was slated to come up for PS5 later this year, and to PC after that. Any and every game that gets sent over to PC is good news in my book. Here's a small history of me and The Last of Us. It was a game that I knew about, and everybody was talking about it once it got released. Talking about how great the story was and how fleshed out the characters were. The acting was superb, the gameplay was great. It really evoked emotion. I knew it was a game that was way up my alley, but I didn't have a PlayStation. Fast forward a couple of years and Christmas rolls around, and I ask for the PS4 bundle with The Last of Us and GTA 5. Yes, I know. It's still a good game, guys. Christmas night, I hooked up my PlayStation and I immediately installed The Last of Us. It was my first Naughty Dog game. I was immediately in awe of the visuals, the gut punch of an opening. The environment is gorgeous. The dynamic between Joel and Ellie is amazing. The game goes to inspire lots. It gets an incredibly divisive sequel, but in my opinion, still a masterpiece of video gaming. On my PlayStation 5, I still have The Last of Us available. I can download it and play it right now. So why is this remake getting made?
Money!
Mr. Krabs, I swear to Christ, you greedy ass motherfucker. This is set to be the definitive version of The Last of Us. Just 2 years ago, a sequel was released with a really nice engine and a ton of accessibility features, making it a widely accessible game that even more people can play. The Last of Us Part 2 looks amazing. It obviously looks better than the first game, but man, this comparison footage makes me really go like... Late PS3 and early PS4 was really a turning point in gaming history, where we're really starting to get fantastic graphics that actually age decently compared to its predecessors. The Last of Us took every last drop out of a PlayStation 3 and squeezed every bit of graphics and performance out of it. And you throw that game on now and it still looks damn good. It makes sense why Naughty Dog wants to implement the assets that they have from The Last of Us 2. But man, charging $70 when it's easily accessible to play the $20 version, or it's free if you have the PlayStation Plus subscription.
Well, so yeah, because that's because the problem here is that they could be, like you said, using these resources to make a new game.
Right.
Like, that's what's starting to bother me, and that's what's been bothering me about the PS5 in general so far, is that there's not been too many original games for it. It's all been PS5 remaster of this game.
Right.
And that game, and this game. It's like, let's make something new. You have this console that everyone like fought to have who has it.
Right.
So like make it worth it.
And we're treading old water still.
they do the remakes or remasters or whatever, and then they charge full price for them.
Right.
It's like, I understand they're a business, they're trying to make money, but
Right.
you gotta take into account that most of the people that are gonna buy this game have probably played it already.
Right. For
So
sure.
it's like I get trying to make money off of maybe new people that never played the game before that are like, all right, I want to try this for the first time. But when the majority of your money is probably going to come from people that played it already,
Right.
maybe make it a little cheaper.
Yes.
There's a show coming out, and they kind of want it to keep it, it's like a marketing tactic, right? They want to make sure that this comes out right before they're starting promoting the show, because they're gonna get new gamers and new people coming in, and yeah, so they want to do that. And I think another reason it's why is because The Last of Us 2 was controversial in its own way, but that's another story.
Right.
In a way, though, it kind of defined who Naughty Dog was in a way, whereas I feel that The Last of Us was more of like, when they first came out with The Last of Us, they were like, let's try this way instead, and kind of were like testing it out, an experiment. And once they felt like they perfected in The Last of Us Part 2, and they said, all right, this is kind of the way we're going, we've improved all the mechanics and everything like that. Let's bring it back to the first one, because everyone loved the first one, and they want to kind of like keep it the same looking in a way,
It's probably going to be the most, if you look at the 3 remakes that we've talked about between, Resident Evil, Dead Space, and Last of Us, The Last of Us is going to be the most similar to its original, probably. Right? Because it's, it's an update for all intents and purposes. And, is that worth the full price of a new game?
Right.
And I have, and from there, you can get into an interesting discussion on, well, how do you determine the worth of a video game?
Right.
In general, because one of the examples I think of is Octopath Traveler. When that game came out, and I saw so many reviews of people going, oh, this shouldn't be a $60 game. This is a $30 game at best.
Right.
What's the reasoning? Well, it's pixel art.
Right.
Okay. Well, that doesn't mean anything, really. I mean, when it comes down to value of a game.
Right.
But some people would argue, well, no, a game should only be quote unquote full priced if it's made by a AAA developer and it was expensive to make. And from there I would say, well, okay, if you want to get into that discussion, then games should cost $90 to $100 now, because video games have been costing $60 since the 1980s.
Yeah.
And in the 80s they were made by a team of 3 to 4 people.
They were more expensive in the 80s. Like, some of them were like $90. Like, I think Fighter, I think like Super Street Fighter or whatever was like a $90 game. And like, that was 80s money. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's...
Games are the cheapest they've ever been right now.
Right, when you boil it down, buying a game now for $60 is a way better value than buying a game, than buying Castlevania for $60. It's an hour and a half long game.
Right.
Because from there you get into the whole thing of, games weren't as long, so they were difficult. And that's how you got your quote unquote value out of them, was that you played them a lot because they were really hard. So you had to play them a lot to get through them.
For sure.
So, I have what I just from talking to different people I've discovered is, I guess, somewhat of a mildly warm take on this. I think a game is worth whatever you feel it's worth as the consumer.
Agreed.
I think if you feel that a game you're buying shouldn't be $60,
don't pay $60.
You're within your right to feel that way, but then don't pay $60 for it. If another person feels that that game is worth $60, they're within their right to feel that way.
Agreed.
Because I think at the end of the day, any piece of entertainment you know, whether it's games, movies, music, whatever it is,
Right.
you're getting an experience out of it. That's what you're really paying for, is for the experience of it.
There, I presented my 3 examples of video game remakes. This really is turning out to be like senior thesis. I still got the kitties too. I hope I get some sort of credit for this. Put me in fucking focus. The purpose of these remakes aren't just about making money. It's about revitalizing a franchise. Naughty Dog's remaking The Last of Us because when people are going to be watching The Last of Us TV show, all the viewers of that show are going to go, hey, this is based off of a video game. They're going to be looking for the game, and they're going to see the most up-to-date version, The Last of Us Part 1, say, hey, it's Part 1, I'm going to play that one first. And then they will, and spend $70 on it because it's the most best-looking one, and they somehow have a PS5 or have a high-end PC. It's all about keeping the franchise alive. With Capcom, they just want to unify all of the Resident Evil games and make them all very cohesive between each other. And Electronic Arts just wants to revive a dead franchise that's been gone for about a decade. Well, what's the difference between movie remakes and video game remakes? Well, first of all, you control one of them, you dumb bastard. That was a controller. They are different mediums. It's important because one of them you actually do play. That's gameplay. It's how you play the game. I would go as far to say that's one of the most important things about remaking a video game, is because maybe the gameplay is outdated. I think our biggest argument for Resident Evil 4 being remade is that it probably doesn't control well in 2022. The game did come out in 2005, and it was pretty much like the world's first third-person shooter. Not to mention, it was designed to be played on this controller. Now, the argument for Dead Space, that's kind of a different story. I think that's one of the most innovative video games that I've ever played. One of the cool things about Dead Space is that it doesn't have a HUD. All that you see on screen is Isaac and whatever he's looking at. If you want to see where you go, you just hit a button, you'll see a little tracker marker to go where you need to go. If you want to see your health, there's a little bar on Isaac's back. If you want to see how much ammo you have, you can look at the gun. I think it's so cool. Plus, the guns that you get in that game all are meant to cut off the limbs of the necromorphs because that just makes them useless. Different guns do different things. It's a crazy cool, innovative game. Now, unfortunately, with The Last of Us and Last of Us Part 2, they're using the Last of Us Part 2 engine, and to be honest, between the two, they don't feel that different to me. All you're really getting is a graphical upgrade. So for gameplay improvements, the only one that I'm really seeing that being necessary for is Resident Evil 4. Everything else is just kind of graphical upgrades. It's so funny to see these 3 games in particular getting remade because, to be honest, they're like 3 of the best looking old games. Like, you can throw any of them on now and they look fantastic. In conclusion, I actually found out that I might be a little bit more hyped for all of these games than I was originally expecting. Doing all this research kind of got me into the mindset of being excited to be in these worlds again. Yes, none of these games are necessary to be remade. They're all very easily accessible to players. But I'll be damned if I didn't want to see some new innovations on some old classics. Will I play any of them immediately on launch day? Probably not. Resident Evil 4 Remake, I could probably see myself getting that when it goes on sale for dirt cheap. And I'll probably wait till the smoke clears on The Last of Us Remake. I want to see if that's actually worth getting. But funny enough, I think I'm the most excited about the Dead Space Remake now. It's really funny because that seems like the most unnecessary remake to me. I could easily just pop that in and see the game. But I kind of want to see what 10 years of innovation looks like for a franchise that used to scare the fuck out of me. So yes, this has been my thesis for rebooting the remake part 2. Stay tuned for the remake of my original thesis, rebooting the remake part 1.